Gimme some sugar.
Ghrelin's not-so-sweet role in sucrose addiction.
Brianna, what are you doing? That's the second Monster I've seen you with today. Aside from all of that caffeine, Monsters have tons of sugar.
And?
As the obesity epidemic rages here in the U.S., peer-reviewed research has implicated the consumption of excess sugar in the development of metabolic syndromes such as diabetes and obesity. What's even worse is that researchers have found that sugar has addictive properties. Sugar's metabolic effects, as well as its addictive properties, come from the fact that ingestion of sugar results in the increase of a hormone called ghrelin. Researchers did a study on the complex interaction between ghrelin and sucrose in mice and men. The researchers discovered that administration of ghrelin led to an increase in sucrose intake, while administration of a ghrelin antagonist led to decreased sucrose consumption. In order to understand the negative effects that sugar can have on your health, it's valuable that you understand the role that ghrelin plays in sugar addiction. Sugar is a generic term for a number of mono and disaccharides, many of which are present in food. The sugar that I'm talking about is one of the most ubiquitous sugars in society, table sugar, or sucrose. Sucrose is a commonly occurring disaccharide. It consists of a glucose and fructose molecule that are attached by glycosidic linkage.
Ghrelin is a peptide hormone that is produced by special ghrelin cells that are present in the pancreas, stomach, brain, and many other locations in the body. Often referred to as the hunger hormone, ghrelin mediates far more processes than the one it's primarily known for, stimulating hunger. So then, what role does ghrelin play in sucrose addiction?
Well, to understand this, we need to explore the molecular role that ghrelin has on dopamine and the mesolimbic system. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that controls the pleasure centers of the brain. Increased levels of dopamine are typically attributed to more positive feelings. Dopamine receptors can be desensitized when one frequently intakes a substance such as alcohol or sucrose. When these dopamine receptors are desensitized, more intake of the substance is required in order to reach the same good feeling again, and that is what causes addiction. The mesolimbic system is a pathway in the brain that facilitates the transport of dopamine. The mesolimbic system is associated with reinforcing natural rewards and is the most important reward pathway. Although it is known that the oxidation of sucrose increases ghrelin, the mechanism through which it does this is still unknown. Upon consumption of sucrose, however, ghrelin is activated.
Produced by the growth hormone receptor ligand gene, ghrelin remains in a pre-progrelin state until activated. Ghrelin receptors are only activated when N-octanoic acid, a fatty acid, is linked to serine at the 3' position by the enzyme GOAT. GOAT stands for...
The greatest of all time?
No, ghrelin O-acetyltransferase. This modification is essential to the function of ghrelin. Ghrelin receptors are growth hormone secretagogue receptors, are co-expressed with dopamine receptors in the brain, and are located on neurons along these circuits. GHSR1A, or growth hormone secretagogue receptors, is a G-protein coupled receptor. Upon binding with ghrelin and in the presence of dopamine, GHSR1A undergoes a conformational change that results in the GHSR1A receptor dimerizing to the dopamine receptor. The GHSR1A receptor attaches to the alpha subunit of the G protein. The beta and gamma subunits are left to interact with adenocyclase and catalyze the formation of CAMP, cyclic AMP, which results in the production of dopamine.
In this paper, the scientists from Huffington Center on Aging and the Baylor College of Medicine worked to determine the neuromodulatory role of ghrelin in the brain. The scientists identified neurons that co-express ghrelin and dopamine and explored the effect that ghrelin had on these receptors. They found that although dopamine can be produced through other means, the presence of ghrelin increased dopamine production by a multiple of 4 times. This graph emphasizes that fact. The co-activation of the growth hormone secretagogue receptor and the dopamine 1 receptor results in amplification of dopamine-induced CAMP accumulation in human embryonic kidney cells. As indicated by the black bars in the graph, accumulation of CAMP rose significantly with the introduction of ghrelin. Since an increase in CAMP results in an increase in dopamine production, over time this could eventually lead to the desensitization of dopamine receptors and eventually addiction.
Researchers set out to discover whether or not sugar could be a substance of abuse by analyzing sucrose consumption. They found that sucrose consumption could lead to the manifestation of the 4 components of addiction: binging, withdrawal, craving, and desensitization. I totally get how a high intake of sugar can lead to an increase in ghrelin and dopamine. No more monsters for me, until finals, that is.